Andrea Yates was the valedictorian of her high school class, an officer of the National Honor Society, and a member of her high school swim team. She went on to pursue a nursing career and became a highly regarded nurse at the M.D. Anderson Cancer Center in Texas.
In the summer of 1989, Andrea was living in the same apartment complex as a man by the name of Russell Yates. He preferred to be called Rusty. They started dating, and after several years, they got married. Their plan was to have as many kids as nature would allow. So she quit her job and started having kids. During this time, they were following the preachings of a street preacher. And they also were living in a converted Greyhound bus that they had purchased from that preacher. They ended up having 5 kids and eventually moved into this house right here, this 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It was on June 20th of 2001 when Andrea drowned all 5 of their young kids in a bathtub in this house. In this video, we're going to take you through the events that led up to that horrific day. We're also going to tell you about some of the things that have happened since, and we cordially invite you to come along.
Andrea suffered from bulimia and depression as a teenager. She even told her friend once when she was 17 years old that she thought about committing suicide.
Despite all that, she was still very successful in her high school years, of course, with that big accomplishment of being the valedictorian of her senior class. There were more than 600 people in that class, so she was very smart. Then she went on and became a registered nurse. She worked for 8 years at M.D. Anderson Cancer Treatment Center here in Houston. Eventually, during that time, she moved into this place here. This was Sunscape Apartments at the time. It was a hot Houston summer day in 1989 when Rusty Yates decided to make a rare trip down to the pool outside his apartment building. He was carrying his boombox with him, blasting out some rock music. When he arrived at the pool, he noticed a slender, attractive woman floating in the pool, pressing her toes against the wall of the pool to keep her body perfectly still on top of the water while she was soaking in the sun. He thought she was beautiful. He would later find out she was a champion swimmer. He also thought he didn't have a chance with her, but he did manage to work up the courage to say a few things to her anyway. He complimented her, but she didn't seem too interested, and he figured she was out of his league anyway. Several months later in October, he got a knock on his door. It was the beautiful woman from the pool. She didn't get out much, but that night she chose to get dressed up and go out to eat. She looked around at the other couples enjoying their evening together and decided she was pretty lonely. So she started thinking about the guy from the pool and decided she'd stop by his apartment when she got back. She used the excuse that her car had gotten a ding in the parking lot and she was curious if he had seen anything. A few weeks later, she left a note on Rusty's car inviting him to stop by her apartment sometime if he wanted to. Shortly after that, they began dating. Not long after that, Rusty and Andrea moved in together. Then on April 17th, 1993, they got married.
We're at Lazy Days RV Resort. This is where the Yates family resided for a while.
This was back in October of 1996 when they moved here for about a month. Then they left for Florida for about 6 months, came back here in June of 1997 to live here at the Lazy Days RV Resort. During their time here, they were following the teachings of a traveling evangelist by the name of Michael Warrenecki. Rusty first met Warrenecki while in college at Auburn University. Rusty wanted Andrea to meet Michael and his wife Rachel before they got married, so he set up the meeting. Michael and Rachel believed people should have a lot of kids, and they had 6 children of their own who they traveled the country with in a bus, homeschooling them. Rachel once wrote, "I can't fathom sending them off to strangers and strange spirits 8 hours a day." Rusty and Andrea ended up having 5 children who they homeschooled as well. And when they found out the Warreneckis were selling the converted GMC bus they had been using to travel around the country in, Andrea and Rusty decided to buy it. They parked it here at Lazy Days and lived in it along with their children. It only had 350 square feet of living space. During this time, Andrea was also taking care of her father, who had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and was still recovering from a heart attack he had suffered several years earlier. The stress, tight quarters of the bus, and postpartum depression all eventually caught up to Andrea, and on June 16, 1999, she called Rusty while he was at work. She was sobbing uncontrollably and asked him to come home. When he arrived, he found her in a chair in the back room of the bus, slumped over, biting her nails with her legs and hands shaking. He packed up the family and headed to her parents' home. The next day, he left to get some things. While he was gone, Andrea told her mom she was going to take a nap. She ended up taking dozens of antidepressant pills that were meant for one of her parents. She was rushed to the hospital.
While Andrea was hospitalized in 1999, her mother told Rusty, "No more living on a bus, you need to purchase a house."
She felt like that bus and those tight quarters with all these people inside this little bus were causing problems for Andrea that were contributing to her mental issues. So at that point, Rusty did decide to take her advice, and he bought this house right here. When they moved in here, Andrea seemed to be doing much better.
She started swimming again at the neighborhood pool. She was planting various plants in the yard. She turned the front room of the house into a classroom for the kids. She read the book Black Beauty with the kids, and when they were done, they went to ride actual horses. She would sew costumes for her kids and even their friends. For birthdays, she'd bake fancy cakes from scratch. They were holding a Bible study at the house 3 nights a week since the Warnackys were against attending church, instead suggesting studying alone or with others at home. Doctors had warned the Yates not to have any more children because her condition could get much worse if they were to have another child. However, since she seemed to be doing much better, Rusty decided she should stop using birth control. Some friends say he was very controlling, with one going so far as to say Rusty only cares about himself. In the spring of 2000, she was pregnant again. On November 30th, 2000, Andrea gave birth to their 5th child, first daughter, Mary. She was doing okay for a while until her father passed away March 12th, 2001.
After that, she really took a turn for the worst very quickly. She would barely talk to anyone. She started pulling out chunks of her hair, leaving bald spots in her head. She was picking at scabs on her body. After that, they had to admit her somewhere, so they took her here. Devereaux Mental Health Facility. They checked her in on March 31st. She stayed here for about a week. Then after that, about 5 weeks later, she had to return again.
It wasn't easy to get Andrea here. They had to force her into the vehicle at the house and then force her out of it here at the facility. Once she got inside, she refused to talk to her doctor, who was a man named Dr. Saeed. Saeed said she barely said a word to him, except to deny having delusions and hallucinations. After 10 days, she was eating again on her own, and Dr. Saeed released her to Rusty. His mom agreed to move into a hotel nearby and come by the house to help Andrea with cleaning and the kids. On May 3rd, Andrea filled the tub with water even though no one was about to take a bath. She explained she was doing it because she might need it. Rusty took her back to Denborough and she was released again on May 14th. Rusty worked at NASA Johnson Space Center as a systems engineer. He would ride his bike to work or drive. It was only 3 miles away from where he lived.
He was working at 9:56 that morning on June 20th of 2001 when his cell phone rang in his office building. It was up on the 6th floor. It was an office that he shared with 3 other NASA employees. His wife was on the phone. She said, "You need to come home." He said, "What's wrong?" She said, "It's time." He said, "What do you mean?" She said, "It's time." He hung up the phone. He ran and told another worker, "I've got a family emergency. I got to go home." He ran to the elevator, went downstairs, got in his car, called his mom, said, "Are you at the house yet?" Because she was supposed to be there around 10 o'clock. She said, "No, I haven't left my hotel yet." He said, "You need to get over there. Something's wrong." He calls back Andrea's cell phone. He was very happy that she answered because he was afraid she was thinking about suicide. He asked her, "Is anybody hurt?"
"Yes," she replied.
"Who?"
"The kids.
"Which ones?"
All of them." When Rusty arrived home, he noticed that there were ambulances and police cars lined all down the road and in his driveway. He landed face first in the yard. He started crying in the grass. Then he got up and started running up to the windows, yelling, "How could you do this? How could you do this?" over and over again. She drowned the 4 younger kids without much difficulty in the same bathtub she had once lovingly bathed them in and washed their hair in. After they died, she carried them one by one to the bed she shared with Rusty and laid them there under a blanket. Their oldest child, Noah, walked into the bathroom, saw his baby sister in the tub, and asked his mom, "What's wrong with Mary?" Andrea said at that moment, Noah took off running, and she had to chase him down, eventually grabbing him and drowning him next to the body of Mary in the filthy tub as he fought with her. After Noah died, she took Mary's body and laid her in the bed with the other 3. She left Noah in the tub, then called the police. The funeral service for the 5 young children was held here at the Clear Lake Church of Christ.
They said about 500 people squeezed into the sanctuary to attend the service. After the service, the kids were buried here at Forest Park East Cemetery in Webster, Texas. Paul Abraham Yates, September 13th, 1997 through June 20th, 2001. John Samuel Yates, December 15th, 1995 through June 20th, 2001. Noah Jacob Yates, February 26th, 1994 through June 20th, 2001. Mary Deborah Yates, November 30th, 2000, June 20th, 2001. Luke David Yates, February 15th, 1999, June 20th, 2001.
This story was such a sad story, absolutely devastating. We want people to pay attention to women who've had babies and might be acting strange or sad or depressed. They need help. Please help them. Don't turn your head because they might hurt themselves or somebody else.
And hopefully through that, something good can come out of this tragedy. We hope you'll join us on future videos by hitting the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.